Hello, my name is Nils Grandelius. I'm a Swedish Grandmaster, and today I'm going to show you a game of my own, a blitz game from last Tuesday against Sergei Karjakin, the former World Championship contender, and I think also former World Blitz champion, or at least very close. It was a very sharp Sicilian fight, which you can see on the board. White has advanced his pawns toward my king, intending either to play f6 or g6 and smash my king side open. But on the other hand, also weakening his own king, like he actually doesn't have any pawns defending his king currently. White also has the bishop pair, which, were we to reach an ending, it could become an advantage for him. But my advantage is a very compact position in the center. Like I have a strong pawn on d5. My bishop is quite strong against his king. Knights are well placed, and it's not that obvious how the white attack is going to break through. In this position, I was a bit surprised by his next move, which seemed to me to be a little bit too greedy. He took the pawn on a5 with the knight, winning a pawn, but also letting me play knight d4, because the knight is no longer covering d4. And now, with his king being the vulnerable one, I felt that my counter-attacking chances would be very, very strong. Like the knight is very far away from the action in the game. Also, the rook is not really doing that much. And I have some ideas with the knight e2 check, for instance, but also just picking up the pawn on f5. He played rook f2, covering the square on e2. And here, I could have played bishop c5, which I, frankly speaking, missed completely. The point is that the pin is very unpleasant for white, and after, for instance, king h1, the knight takes c2 would attack both this rook on a1, but also the other rook by the bishop, so I would win some material here with a very nice position. But I was too tempted by another idea that I found here, and that was to play rook takes f5. The move in itself is very natural. I'm taking a pawn, I'm threatening to take his rook, after which the king would become even weaker. And I'm opening up for this bishop, but white, of course, plays bishop h3, and now if I move the rook, then my queen would be hanging. But after bishop h3, I mean, my idea and what I played was to actually give up my queen with rook takes f2. So white has to take the queen, and rook takes d2. Now I only have a bishop. I only have, a rook and a knight for the queen, but his attack is completely gone. My king is completely safe because I took this pawn, and my rook on the second rank is very, very strong, especially compared with the knight on d4. So I did evaluate the position during the game as being very promising for me, and after analyzing it afterwards, I realized that it's in fact very close to winning, or probably just winning for black. So Karjakin decided to fight with rook e1. He is, of course, a very, very stubborn fighter, a very stout defender. With rook e1, he protects against knight e2 check, which would have won the queen. And now, for me, it was about finding the right way to break through. And this, unfortunately, I did not manage. The best and simplest, move would have been to play g6, kicking the queen away. If queen h6, the queen is simply trapped to bishop f8. So he has to go to g4. But now, having played g6, I have a square for my king on g7. And his pressure against f7 is gone, so I could actually just take on b2 with my other rook. And, my rook on b8 was the only piece that isn't contributing that much to my attack. So after I take on b2, I can also take the pawn on c2 next, and with two rooks on the second rank, and the attack would be unstoppable. So this was definitely the simplest way of doing it. Instead, I decided to pick up a pawn with tempo, I thought. And then later on I could consider taking on b2, and then the pawn on c2 would already be gone. But now he played rook f1, gaining a counter tempo, or so I thought, against the pawn on f7. And here it's already getting quite a lot trickier, because my knight is decentralized on c2. It was much stronger on d4, where it could go to both d4 and f3. So here I actually need to come up with some very good moves, and I failed quite badly in the game. Knight e3 was the best move, giving up the pawn with check. But the point is that the knight combined with the bishop and the rook still gives me a huge attack. I was afraid of rook f6 during the game. Because if I take, then my king is also very weak. He can, for instance, take and then pick up the bishop, and then I would guess at least a perpetual check. But what I missed was that I do not need to take the rook immediately. I can play rook g2 check, or in fact I can probably do it this way. I can also take immediately on b2. It will be the same. He takes my bishop, and now rook g2 check, king h1, rook b1, and this would be checkmate. He doesn't have to do rook takes d6, but if he doesn't do it, then it's not so clear what he's up to next. Like if he retreats with the rook, then my attack will continue with rook b1 and next rook to b2, and this would still be winning for me. But it was simply not. I mean, it simply didn't occur to me that the idea of sacrificing the pawn on f7 and allowing this rook f6 would be the right way. So in the game, I decided to try what I thought was more solid with rook f8, protecting the pawn. But the problem now is that the b pawn is alive, and my rook is missing for the attack against his king. So knight c6, bringing the knight into the game finally after this horrendous knight takes a5. Knight e3 I played. Now if the rook now rook e1 he played, and here was the final moment in which I could still get somewhat good position. And this is actually another quite instructive moment. So my knight is attacked, and it's very natural to move it, or to play what I did in the game with bishop c5. But I do have another major problem in my position. Now I have another piece which is definitely the worst placed one. And that is the knight on c7, which is very far from his king. And here I could solve both my issues at once. By playing the move d4, which simply frees up the square on d5 for the knight, and also protects the other knight. And after something like queen f3, I can play knight cd5, and now the rook can no longer come back to f1. So if he were to play similar to the game with b4, then I would be in time to bring my rook. And once it reaches a2 again, I will get a winning attack. So very important and nice move d4 to bring the final piece into the battle. Instead I played bishop c5, but then after king h1 I tried to bring my knight with knight e6 instead, but it does allow white to capture the knight. Well, he didn't capture immediately, he started with b4, but after bishop b6 he captured on e6. And now after f takes e6, knight e7 check, I had to go to h8, but then there is knight g6 check, winning my rook on f8, and not only the rook, but now my coordination and my is is gone, and my king has become very weak, much weaker than his. So king takes f8, queen f3 check, attacking the knight, and after knight f5, just rook takes e6, and both the knight and the bishop are hanging, so I'm losing more material. And after rook f2, he could have done many different things, but decided to play queen a3 and go for an attack on his own. I tried to give a few checks with very little time on the clock, but he just went up to h3. And now, yeah, I played one more move with king f7. He took my bishop, and after knight d4, queen a7 check, I resigned. So yeah, a bit of a pity after having such a nice queen sacrifice, but also goes to show how strong these top players are in defense, and how accurate you have to be throughout the whole game, even when you have a very, very good position against them. Hope you enjoyed the game, and see you soon again. Thank you very much.